6:21 local, Strait of Hormuz. T-minus 11 minutes until weapons range. 60 Iranian fast boats. Nearly 5,000 Americans inside a 100,000-ton carrier strike group. Every second counts. This is the story of 42 minutes that changed everything. Dawn over the Strait of Hormuz can look almost peaceful. The water glows copper under the first light. Tankers move like floating cities. Omani cliffs stand dark in the distance. Iranian coastline watches from the north. It is one of the narrowest, most dangerous maritime choke points on Earth, barely 21 miles across at its tightest point, with shipping lanes that compress everything into a corridor of pressure, noise, and calculation. And cutting through that corridor in this scenario is a U.S. Navy carrier strike group. At the center is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, nuclear-powered, massive, a moving airbase with catapults, arresting gear, strike fighters, electronic attack jets, helicopters, and enough fuel, ordnance, and command capability to project force across an entire region. Around her, the screen. 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers with Aegis combat systems, vertical launch cells, standard missiles, close-in guns, and crews trained for exactly the kind of morning no one wants to see. Above, an E-2D Hawkeye circles high, the airborne quarterback. Lower, MH-60 helicopters prowl with sensors scanning the waterline. On deck, Super Hornets sit chained and ready. Growlers wait to blind what needs blinding. Imagine you're here. You're standing on the starboard catwalk, salt in the air, jet fuel in your throat, the deck humming under your boots. You know where you are, not in the open Pacific. Not in blue water comfort. You are in a funnel. On one side, Iran's southern coast. On the other, Oman's Musandam Peninsula. Every radar return matters. Every fishing boat gets a second look. Every mistake has strategic consequences. Because this isn't just about a ship. It's about credibility, freedom of navigation, deterrence, the authority of U.S. Fifth Fleet in a region where miscalculation can turn a crowded waterway into a war zone before breakfast. Now shift perspective. North Shore, Bandar Abbas, small piers, hardened revetments, camouflage netting, engines already warm. The plan forming on the Iranian side in this fictional scenario is simple, aggressive, and dangerous in exactly the way asymmetric doctrine prefers. Not a stand-up naval battle. Not a clean missile duel over open water. A close-in pressure attack using confusion. By numbers, geography, and speed. 60 fast inshore attack craft and missile-capable boats sortie in staggered groups from the Iranian coast and nearby island positions. Siraj-type speedboats. Ashura-style small craft. A handful of larger Paykop-class missile boats mixed deeper in the formation. Most carry heavy machine guns, rockets, recoilless rifles, or crew-served weapons. A smaller number carry anti-ship missiles intended for a short, violent launch inside the clutter of the strait. Their objective is not to sink a carrier outright. That would be fantasy, and they know it. Their objective is to get close enough to create chaos, force a U.S. first shot dilemma, trigger worldwide footage, maybe damage an escort, maybe land a lucky hit on a flight deck edge. I'd maybe shut traffic through the strait for 48 hours and declare victory to the world. Political shock, market panic, strategic theater. They believe the narrow waters protect them. They believe civilian traffic complicates American rules of engagement. They believe if they spread wide enough, close fast enough, and use fishing dhows and merchant wakes as clutter, the U.S. response window will shrink from minutes to seconds. They believe that when a 100,000-ton symbol of American power is boxed in by cheap, fast boats, hesitation becomes their ally. It's a chess match in a waterway too tight for mistakes, and for 6 minutes, they think it's working. Here's what they got wrong. They are planning for a ship. They are not accounting for a network. They are counting hulls. The Americans are counting signatures, bearings, speed changes, emission patterns, launch geometry, formation behavior, and hostile intent. While the boats believe they are stalking a target, the target has already built a picture of the hunt from sea level to high altitude. That is the flaw in their thinking. At 0614, the first anomaly isn't dramatic. It's procedural. Surface contacts departing multiple Iranian coastal points at unusual speed and in unusual coordination. Not random traffic, not fishermen. Too synchronized, too clean. At 0615, the E-2D Hawkeye reports pattern convergence. Multiple groups angling not for commercial shipping but for the carrier track line. One destroyer's spy radar confirms clustered surface movement. Electro-optical systems begin sorting wakes and hull silhouettes. An MH-60R dips lower, FLIR staring into the morning haze. On the carrier's tactical displays, green symbols start to multiply. At 0616, the bridge gets the call. Possible swarm profile. At 0617, the strike group commodore doesn't guess. He verifies. Course lines projected, speeds calculated, closest point of approach shrinking. The contacts are not passing by, they are closing in. At 0618, the air wing is told to flex. You're there now. General quarters is seconds away. The 1MC crackles. Sailors move with practiced violence. No panic, just speed. Helm adjustments, weapons teams man stations, ready service lockers open. On the destroyers, the combat information centers go cold and focused. On the carrier, yellow shirts and ordnance crews hustle beneath the rising scream of turbines coming alive. Could you make that switch that fast? From routine transit to combat posture with thousands of lives behind you? At 0619, on bridge-to-bridge warnings go out in English and Farsi. Unidentified Iranian naval craft, you are approaching coalition warships. Alter course immediately. Maintain safe distance. No response. At 0620, another warning, then another. This time, several boats fan wider. That's not de-escalation. That's geometry. They are building attack lanes. General quarters. Now the strike group transforms. The carrier turns slightly to open deck options and complicate a missile solution. One destroyer pushes forward on the threat axis, physically interposing itself between the densest group and the carrier. The second destroyer widens the screen, creating a crossing field of fire. An MH-60R accelerates to the outer ring. Another remains overhead as an armed reserve. The E-2D keeps the picture stitched together. And a Growler launches to stand by for electronic attack if coastal radars or data links light up. Two Super Hornets are airborne within minutes, not for cinematic heroics, but for overwatch, identification, and immediate strike if the situation breaks open. At 0623, range drops under 12 nautical miles for the lead boats. At 0624, warning shots splash ahead of the nearest group. 8 boats peel away. 52 keep coming. That number tells you everything. Not a misunderstanding, not a protest, not posturing, a deliberate close. The first wave is low, fast, and ugly. White rooster tails behind them, hulls slamming the chop. Men crouched behind mounted guns. Rocket tubes visible on some decks. On infrared screens, engines burn like coals. On the carrier, you can now see them with the naked eye as dark needles in the glare. At 0626, hostile intent is declared, and the outer layer begins. The MH-60R on the threat axis attacks first. No drama, no speech, just disciplined weapons employment. A Hellfire drops into the lead missile boat and turns it into a vertical column of flame and spray. Seconds later, guided rockets walk across a second craft trying to weave behind a tanker's wake. The destroyer's combat system marks both contacts as kills. 50 become 48, then 47. One of the Iranian boats fires, not a missile. A burst of heavy machine gun tracers skipping over the water toward the screening destroyer. Another launches unguided rockets that fall short, splashing harmlessly, but ending the legal question once and for all. Hostile act confirmed. Now the restraint burns off. The forward destroyer answers with Mark 38 25mm fire and crew-served weapons. In controlled, surgical, aimed at engines and mounts. A third boat slews sideways, dead in the water. A fourth pitches up, bow shattered. The second destroyer joins in from a crossing angle, forcing the swarm to maneuver under intersecting fire. 45 remaining in the attack. But the most dangerous contacts are not the closest ones. They're the missile boats hanging behind the chaos, trying to use the gunfight as camouflage. The E-2D sees the shape of it first. The Hawkeye controller calls out a separate cluster decelerating, spacing out, and turning broadside. That is launch behavior. The Americans don't need to hear the order spoken on the Iranian side. They can read it in the formation. At 0628, 2 PACAP-type boats pop smoke and fire. Then 2 more. 8 anti-ship missiles rise low over the water. We're skimming through the clutter of spray and horizon, hidden for seconds that feel like eternity. Now, the strait erupts. The forward destroyer's Aegis system snaps from surface fight to air defense in a heartbeat. Standard missiles leap from the vertical launch system, hot and white, climbing before knifing down toward the inbound tracks. Another destroyer feeds the same picture, overlapping fire control solutions. 2 missiles dive farthest out, torn apart over open water. A third vanishes in a flash so bright it reflects off the carrier's island windows. A fourth breaks apart and cartwheels into the sea. 4 down, 4 still coming. ESSM follows, faster, tighter, built for the knife fight. One inbound is shredded. Another loses guidance and buries itself in the water. A third keeps driving, damaged but alive. I'm skipping lower and lower toward the screen. You're on that destroyer now. Combat system alarms. Voices clipped and flat. Range collapsing. Seconds left. Ram launches from the carrier's close-in defense. The missile streaks off the angled launcher and punches the inbound threat apart off the port quarter. Debris rains into the sea. 7 down. 1 survives the outer layers. And that is why the Phalanx exists. The last missile bursts through the smoke, sea-skimming inside the final line. The Phalanx mount rotates with terrifying speed, radar locked, gun already spooling. Then the sound. Not thunder, not one shot. A solid metallic scream, a stream of tungsten tears through the air. The missile disappears into a spray cloud just seconds from the screen, fragments splashing wide. 8 launched, 8 destroyed, 0 hits. Could you breathe in that moment? Or would you still be staring at the horizon, waiting for number 9? The Iranian swarm doesn't stop. If anything, the surviving boats accelerate. Some are now inside 5 nautical miles, trying to force the fight into pure surface chaos where every second favors desperation. This is where training matters. The U.S. response does not become wild. It becomes layered. Armed helicopters continue picking boats from the edges, killing the commanders and missile carriers first. Super Hornets slash overhead at low altitude, not dropping heavy bombs in crowded waters, but using speed, presence, and precision to herd surviving craft back into the destroyer's fields of fire. One jet makes a dry pass so low the rotor wash from the earlier helicopters is replaced by pure jet violence. Several Iranian boats break formation instantly. That matters. Swarms live on coordination, break the geometry, and the mass becomes targets. At 0631, a pair of boats attempt a suicide-style charge toward the screening destroyer. They are destroyed by combined 25mm and .50 caliber fire before reaching effective range. At 0632, another missile boat tries to turn away behind merchant traffic. An MH-60R tags it and fires. Kill. At 0633, one damaged Iranian craft continues drifting forward, burning, ammunition cooking off. A second explodes when ready-use rockets detonate. A third beaches itself on a shoal trying to evade pursuit. Minute by minute, the timeline becomes brutal. Minute 4, first missile volley eliminated. Minute 7, outer surface ring shattered. Minute 10, command boats identified and destroyed. Into minute 13, organized swarm behavior collapses. Minute 16, surviving craft begin retreat on divergent headings. From 60 boats that surge toward the strike group, only 33 are still moving with any control. Then 26, then 19. And still, the carrier has not taken a hit. That is the difference between spectacle and power. One side relies on being seen, the other relies on seeing first. At 0637, the last serious threat emerges from the fog of broken boats and smoke. 3 surviving missile-capable craft, farther north than expected, probably held back as a reserve. Smart, dangerous, too late. The Growler, already on station, begins electronic attack. Iranian coastal emitters trying to support the reserve boats with targeting data suddenly face noise, confusion, and broken connectivity. A Super Hornet pair, already vectored by the Hawkeye, rolls in. Precision-guided munitions strike 2 boats almost simultaneously. The third turns hard for the Iranian coast, chased by helicopter optics and marked for follow-on engagement. That's the moment everything changes. Because now, this is no longer a swarm trying to embarrass a carrier. Now, it is an armed attack against U.S. forces in one of the world's most sensitive waterways, documented across every sensor in the strike group, every radio transmission recorded, every launch observed, every hostile act legally unmistakable. The request goes up the chain fast. NavCent in Bahrain has the picture. U.S. Central Command has the picture. Washington has the picture. The recommendation is limited, but overwhelming. Neutralize the remaining immediate maritime threat, then strike the coastal network that generated it. Not regime change, not invasion. A calculated demonstration. Remove the boats, remove the launch points, remove the command nodes. Make a repeat attack impossible by nightfall. Authorization granted. At 0640, the counterattack begins. What does a carrier strike group look like when it stops defending and starts erasing the infrastructure behind the attack? It looks systematic. First, the maritime battle space is sealed. Fighters and helicopters keep the surviving boats boxed away from the carrier. Destroyers hold fire control quality tracks on anything still moving south. A P-8 farther out in the theater contributes broader maritime surveillance. Tankers and civilian traffic are warned clear as best they can be. The corridor is carved into kill boxes and exclusion zones. Then the strike package launches. Super Hornets armed for coastal targets. Growlers for suppression and jamming. Hawkeye overhead to manage the traffic and keep everyone deconflicted. From the destroyers, Tomahawks rise in rippling salvos, turning east and north toward pre-planned and rapidly updated coordinates. On the Iranian coast in this scenario, the targets are not cities. They are military enablers, IRGC piers near Bandar Abbas, fuel dumps feeding the fast boat force, ammunition bunkers, waterfront command posts, coastal surveillance radars, missile sheds, maintenance yards, communications relays on islands used to support swarm operations. For every one of the surviving attack craft now trying to flee, multiple American shooters are hunting the system that launched it, now from the enemy's view. 1 minute ago, you were part of a mass, a swarm, a political statement with engines. Now you are prey in open water while the shoreline behind you starts exploding in sequence. Radar goes dark, radios cut in and out, fuel points burn. The pier you expected to return to is gone. The command truck that pushed you forward is a crater. The showcase has become a purge. At 0644, Tomahawks hit the first coastal node. A flame ball climbs over the waterfront. At 0646, secondary explosions confirm munition storage. At 0648, a radar site on elevated ground goes silent. At 0650, another pier is struck, collapsing into the water with moored craft still tied alongside. At 0652, Super Hornets deliver glide weapons against hardened boat pens and revetments on an island support site. At 0654, a Growler-supported strike suppresses surviving air defense coverage just long enough for follow-on weapons to land cleanly. This is not random. Bases, then production, then command chain. Immediate capability, then regeneration capacity, then the ability to coordinate what remains. A carrier strike group doesn't just swat the hand, it breaks the wrist, then the arm behind it. By 0657, the last organized Iranian surface contacts are either destroyed, sinking, or running north at full speed with no coherent attack line left. By 0703, the coastal network that enabled the assault is shredded across multiple points. Fire columns mark the shoreline. Harbor entrances are blocked by wreckage. Fuel burns black. Ammunition cooks off in bright, vicious pops. Surveillance coverage is patchy at best. Surviving commanders are cut off from surviving crews. And on the carrier, flight operations continue. That image matters more than any press release. The deck still works. Aircraft still launch. The formation still moves. The strait did not close. The carrier did not stop. The message is unmistakable. Final tally in this fictional scenario. 60 Iranian boats surged toward the strike group. 43 were destroyed outright. 10 were crippled or abandoned. 7 escaped north, many damaged. 8 anti-ship missiles were fired. All 8 were intercepted. U.S. losses: no ship sunk, no mission kill, 1 helicopter lightly damaged by fragmentation, 4 American personnel wounded. Iranian coastal infrastructure hit in the follow-on strike. 2 waterfront command posts, 4 piers or launch points, 3 fuel and ammunition sites, 2 radar nodes, the multiple maintenance areas and boat pens. Total duration: 42 minutes from swarm detection to collapse of the assault network. Less time than a commute. Long enough to rewrite the regional balance for weeks. And that is the lesson. Modern naval warfare is not won by the platform you can see. It is won by the web you can't. Sensors linked to shooters, air linked to surface, electronic attack linked to targeting, rules of engagement linked to disciplined crews who know exactly when restraint ends and force begins. Iran's boats in this scenario were fast, numerous, and dangerous. But speed without information is just momentum. Numbers without integration are just targets waiting to be sorted. They thought the narrow waters of Hormuz would trap a U.S. carrier. Instead, the strait trapped them in a layered kill chain of radar, helicopters, missiles, guns, and decision-making speed they could not outrun. That is what future conflict looks like in confined seas. Not chaos alone, coordinated chaos, precision under pressure, human beings making lethal choices in seconds, while the entire world hangs on a shipping lane barely wider than a city. So, which decision was most critical? The early warning call from the Hawkeye, the restraint before the first confirmed hostile act, or the immediate counterstrike against the coastal network? Debate below. Hit subscribe for in-depth military breakdowns.